Welcome, Governor Polis. It's lovely to have you here. Do you have some comments or
Sure.
that you would like to share with us?
Well, it's great to be back here at the state board. I was, when I was served 6 years on the state board, we met with the governor each year, and I know we appreciated that. It was very important because, like the governor, the state board is an executive agency of state government, and when we work hand in hand, we're far more effective than if we're ever at odds. So it's always best to try to work together to run the executive agency of government in conjunction with the other agencies. There's a number of areas of shared responsibility that CDE has with other state agencies, whether it's Department of Human Services around early childhood, whether it is teacher preparation around CCHE. These are very important relationships with other executive agencies that have different governance, and that relationship is incredibly valuable. I would add that we obviously meet here at a time when our state has undergone a great tragedy with the horrific acts at the STEM Academy in Douglas County. And I know that all of you, as us, are deeply invested in school safety, and I think it's important that the state board and the governor really step up and get involved around how we can improve school safety in our state. It's important at the same time to reassure parents that in fact schools are safe, but they can be even safer, particularly in these times. We appreciated working with the state board on full day kindergarten funding, a enormous step forward for kids and families in our state. And the support of the state board was absolutely critical in achieving something that has been elusive for decades in our state, and one that will finally be recognized this fall. We further look forward to working with the state board on the successful implementation of full-day kindergarten across the wide diversity of districts that we have. It's my understanding that the state board is currently, or the CDE is currently involved with polling and learning from districts with regard to their particular plans. We work very closely with Representative Byrd on the BEST grant piece to help make sure that there were implementation funds available for school districts as well, which I believe if they're recommended by BEST, are they then just sort of formally approved on your consent agenda, or do they send them out themselves?
They do officially approve them.
They do it themselves.
Yep.
Yeah, that's great. So that we wanted that to be as easy as possible, because this is, this August we're talking about kindergarten starting. So districts with those needs of moving half-day classrooms to full day or opening up additional space needed that
Little
implementation
furniture.
money right away. What's that?
Little furniture?
Little furniture, exactly. It won't, pay for building any classrooms, and there's probably some districts that will need to bond to fully recognize full day K. But by and large, many districts already provided it. Most already provided it. They just had to charge for it. And of course, districts that were ahead of the curve and ahead of the state, and there are a number of them, particularly in southern Colorado, Pueblo 60 and 70, many of the El Paso districts, and some of the lower income districts in the Denver metro area that are smaller were already there. They will recognize significant savings because they'll no longer have to backfill what the state was not funding for kindergarten. So I think it's an important statement that the state board, the legislature, the governor are making here, that kindergarten is every bit as important as first grade, every bit as important as second grade, if not more, and that we are finally treating it as such in Colorado. Also very excited to be working with you on dual and concurrent enrollment opportunities and expanding across Colorado to give more students the opportunity to get transferable and aligned community college credit while they're in high school. Another area of sort of joint responsibility between school districts, CDE, and our community college system. We also want to focus our efforts on improving the graduation rate at some of our highest dropout rate high schools, and we were thrilled that the legislature passed a 9th grade success program, which will provide a real targeted assistance to some of our highest dropout rate high schools in the state, particularly focusing on what the data shows will make a difference, which is a successful 8th and 9th grade transition and success in 9th and 10th grade, because once students are several credits behind, by the time they're in 11th grade or 12th grade, they're far more likely to drop out. And again, it seems like common sense. They're just looking at it and say, wait a minute, you mean I have to be here a 5th year if I'm going to graduate? I'm not going to do that, versus making sure they're on track right from that transition to graduate. the dropout rate remains a problem, particularly in high schools and school districts that have a particularly a high dropout rate. So this is an important partnership. It's extremely important in all areas that the state board and the governor work together. We share many areas of focus, from ensuring each and every child has a strong foundation to improving educational equity, providing options for students after high school graduation, getting into that realm of looking at apprenticeships and skill certifications and other areas for kids that might not be going on to a four-year university. How can they have the skills that they need to succeed in a 21st century workplace? And know that you have a partner in the governor's office. No surprise with my background on the state board and also as a former superintendent of a charter school serving at-risk kids. I will be make sure that the issues around education, about 40% of the state budget, are elevated, and that we make sure that first and foremost the state of Colorado fulfills its responsibility to ensure that every kid can achieve a great education.
Thank you. We feel very fortunate that we have a friend in the governor's office. Pretty excited about a lot of the legislation, some of which you just referred to. Concurrent enrollment, but also career and technical education, the opportunity to use some BEST money to help schools provide the facilities for that, which actually can be kind of expensive. We're really excited about the READ Act, I guess. That's foremost. And I'm looking forward to the work that the Dyslexia Committee is going to be doing in the coming year. I think that's going to be helpful to make sure that we roll that out in an effective way so that it helps all kids in particular. Another area that we're very interested in that I'm not sure what your involvement was in, but that's the Principal Professional Development Program. We feel like it's key for our schools for improvement, for supporting our teachers, et cetera. So thank you for all the work you've done. Any questions, colleagues of the governor? Do you have a question?
I have a statement. Thank you. I know you support early childhood, and I think that for equity's sake, we really do need to have 3- and 4-year-olds. And I know we'll have 8,000 seats, which is just an incredible amount of seats for children in this is information that we got from CDE, that we'll have 800 seats for 3- and 4-year-olds, and that's amazing. I mean, it is incredible, but we certainly do need to have more seats and support for all those kids that are low income, minority kids who would really would gain so much from it, not just now, but later in life as research shows that it does. So thank you so very much for pushing for early childhood.
And I would point out that in addition to the e-care slots that you referenced that are now available for preschool, we fully expect that some of the districts that had already had funded full-day kindergarten will likely push some of that money to preschool. So that'll be a district-by-district decision, but I think that there will likely be district-level investments in preschool above and beyond the e-care slot investment, and we'll look forward to seeing that in the coming years. And I want to, again, thank the State Board for their work on READ Act, on so many other areas. When you speak with one voice, you are listened to and respected. Republicans and Democrats coming together with the sector expertise in education, a highly valued voice across the street in the Capitol, and certainly with your commissioner on our cabinet as well.
Thank you.
Any other? So finally, I understand that you will be joining your daughter's happy birthday party this week, and so we have a little present for you.
Oh. The background on that is that when we were explaining political parties to my 7-year-old son, he's saying, oh, it's the Democratic Party, Republican Party, the Green Party, Libertarian Party. Our 4-year-old daughter piped in, I'm in the happy birthday party. Oh my gosh, look at that. That was, look at that. Yeah, that's back when I had a full head of hair when I was in the State Board. That's what the State Board of Education 6 years will do to you, but yeah.
Got your State Board of Education badge on there.
Yeah. Well, Thank you.
And thank you,
you so much.
Governor. I do just want to say thank you. The partnership with you and your office has been wonderful, and appreciate being on the cabinet and working hand in hand with your staff and your team.
Thank you.
So happy birthday,
Thank you.
good health,
Thank
and
you.
success in the coming year.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for coming.
Is that yours or mine?
See, I read everything, but.
Somebody's trying to call me. Oh, yeah. I think I'm out of order, right?
So yeah, we're going to go back to
Item 6.
item 6.
Next item on our agenda is fiscal year budget discussion. Commissioner?
Yes, thank you. I'm going to ask Ms. Oakes to come forward. And I'm sure she would like the raise to be the governor, but we're changing out the name tags. And Ms. Oakes is just going to share with us, we're actually a month earlier coming to you on just the very initial budget discussion because OSPB has moved up their deadlines. So we have thus had to move up our deadlines to start this discussion a bit earlier. So Ms. Oakes is going to take us through that.
Remind me, this is not money that we're asking for the coming fiscal year. It's that much further ahead.
So this is the money that we're requesting for the 2021 budget year, so starting a year from now. So we just finished up the legislative process for the upcoming year, starting in July. This is for next July.
So we don't actually know if there's any money then,
Right.
but we'll get organized on what we believe we need.
Yes.
We have to pretend. Thank you.
Yes.
Go ahead, Ms. Oakes.
Okay, so just gonna really highlight on the next slide. Do I have control over this? Oh.
But you're organized.
Oh, it's right there. Like, I don't know where to look, sorry. Okay, so we'll just quickly overview of the budget process to remind you from last year, highlight our budget currently, and then discuss potential budget items again for next year. And then get your direction, any questions that you have, and get direction on the next steps for us to proceed. So every year, we'll do an internal assessment of our budget needs that we currently have, or the budget that we currently have in comparison to our strategic plan, and any areas that we have maybe some strategic organizational needs. And then we'll bring those to you all for consideration and to see if those are areas that you want us to dive into further. And then we will do further investigation and research and refining any numbers on anything that you approve today. We'll bring that back in June to you. Again, as Commissioner mentioned, that's earlier than previously. Last year, we came to you in June and then followed up in August. So we'll do today and then we'll come back next month. And then anything that's approved by you all, we will submit on July 1st to the Governor's Office of State Planning and Budgeting, and then that in turn goes into the November 1st request when the Governor submits the budget for the state. And so then, as you know, we got into the JBC cycle with the hearing process and then figure setting next winter. So I don't have this slide, all the details of it, because we are just finishing up session and we haven't included all of the various bills. But the pie chart will show you generally where we are. We are at $5.8 billion for the CDE budget, and over 97%, 97.5%. Last year it was 97.5%, but we did a big jump from 5.1 billion to 5.8 billion. A lot of that was because of the full day kindergarten and the other investments of buying down the negative factor or the budget stabilization factor. So we even have a smaller slice of that pie. So we're probably looking somewhere about $130 million just for the admin for CDE. So again, we'll have the details once we get through all of getting all of the details of all of the legislation and all of the funding that came through that. When we dig into that small piece, that 2 or so percentage of that big piece,
Does that admin include school for deaf and blind?
that would not. So last year we pulled out both CSI and School for the Deaf and Blind and just focused on that. I can highlight both of those numbers for you in June. Okay. And then if you look at that slice that we have, 130 or so million, it's really kind of evenly split between staff, CDE staff, and then just our normal operating expenditures, and then contracts for those larger contracts that we come up with. So again, we'll have more details, but this is sort of what we're looking at is adjustments to that admin budget for the most part. So as we go through and look, we had really identified there's 4 areas, but 2 of them are the annual and required ones that really take up that big slice of the pie, the total program and the categorical funds. And again, we will work at a later date once we have better information on working through that. That's just the normal process. But we've identified 2 potential ones that we'd like to get your input on, both educator preparation programs and educator licensing. So related areas. So diving into that, Educator Preparation Office oversees the program approval, authorization, reauthorization of all of those ed prep programs. And we kind of continuously look at how we're funding our programs and is it appropriate. And we've really seen a growth in this area of a little bit in traditional programs and a lot in the alternative prep programs. So with the institutions of higher ed, they collaborate with us and they do some subsidizing of the travel and expenses associated with doing those reviews. But we still pick up some of those operational reimbursement type things out of our budget. And then for the alternative prep programs, that's all done out of our own budget. So, and it's out of those, it's out of the teacher licensing program. So it's cash funded by fees with teachers. And so we're doing that and we're keeping up with that. But we've really identified that we could do a better job and we would like to do more involved review of those ed prep programs, not only authorization up front, but reauthorization. And then with alternative teacher prep, there's also those induction programs that we go through that work with many of the district-placed educators. So we have identified a need. So there's about 56 ed prep programs today, and that's grown fairly significantly. So if we look back to 2011, we were down to 37 programs, and so we've increased up, so a significant number. And so that's sort of driving that because there's an increased number. A lot of that was in the alternative program, so we went from 19 up to 28. But even with the traditional, we went from 18 to 23, 25, somewhere in there. So we've seen that growth. It's putting more stress on our staff, and we think that we could do a better job if we had a dedicated funding stream for that. So that's something that we'd like to work with you all at looking at it. And so again, we like to start out with a high number. We can always refine that, but we think $90,000 would be that high end. It would be to the stipends and travel reimbursement for team members for the authorization, reauthorization, and induction review. We could really do program supports for deeper work in the core areas. And again, a lot of the individuals, we want content experts in there, so we get folks from the K-12, we get higher ed, we get CDE staff as well. So we're trying to get a really good, broad-based group of individuals to do those reviews.
So that's not at FTE?
It would not be a full FTE. It's really just doing stipends. So to provide
Okay.
right now those teachers from K-12 or the institutions of higher ed, they're just giving their staff time. So this would allow us to give stipends and then reimburse those from a dedicated line item.
And Madam Chair, this is just to put a finer point on this. As we have talked as a board about you wanting us to do more intense reauthorizations of our ed prep programs and bringing more high quality expertise in the areas of reading, evidence-based reading instruction, we actually don't, we sometimes need to incentivize people to come on those multi-day visits with us. And, up till now, we've sort of been piecing together volunteers, and as the programs have increased, the time and travel and all of that increases. So if we had some ability to sort of entice some of the best experts to come with us, then I think we will have more comprehensive reviews of those programs.
And you do those jointly with Department of Higher Ed?
The Department
Yeah.
of Higher Education, yes, except for the alternative prep programs. The alternative prep programs are 100% under our authority. So we have to put those teams together solely from our team.
Wow.
How does it overlap with higher ed? I mean, this gets to be a gray area.
Sometimes alternative prep programs are in partnership with higher education, and so then, there may be some overlap, but then there are some that are completely separate from higher ed, like maybe a local BOCES runs an alternative prep program, and so that would be separate, but yes, there is some overlap.
May I ask you if the computer system that you needed for in certification, has that been funded? Has that been done? I know that was a problem.
Yes, the educator licensing, the e-licensing system, we are either about to be out for RFP on that or out. I'm not exactly sure, but yes, we're moving on that front. But that does not have to do with this. That's a
But
separate.
the monies are.
We were able to save up money, and actually from previous decisions you all made on licensure fees, we were able to gather that money.
But is it fair that licensing fees for teachers is, there's licensing fees for others, but it just kind of falls on the Department of Education, on CDE, and the Department of Certification to deal with those fees when there are extra state monies for other departments in the government that do licensing, but yet those come from outside. And it's only, at least that's my understanding. If it's not, please tell me so. That we license and we collect that money, which could be used for, other research and such in the department, and yet we're the only, I guess, department that has to depend solely on those fees to do other work. And like you said, you had to save up for that computer system. And shouldn't it be fair that the state really think about paying for those services, or at least so that, I guess, the division or the Department of Education doesn't have to take up all that cost
Thank you for your comments. I think
for licensing?
For licensing, right. I think that could be a larger discussion at another time, but the way it has worked up till now is the licensing fees from educators supports the licensing division in the department. It doesn't mean that other department budgets don't fund the other things that unit does, but the licensing fees are to go toward supporting all of the things that are required along the licensing time, process. And I think that is similar to other agencies that do licensing, like wildlife licensing, like hunting and fishing, those fees that are paid for those licenses goes to run that particular slice of the program. So a larger conversation that we can certainly have.
Okay.
And this is a little bit connected to that in that we, sometimes we have to pull from those dollars to review prep programs, and this would allow us to have a dedicated funding source for reauthorization of preparation programs.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Thank you.
Part 2.
So part 2 is related to educator licensing background checks. And this is directly related to legislation that during the 2019 session, it was House Bill 1166, that requires the results of a fingerprint criminal history background check for certain applicants when that reveals a record of arrest without a final disposition, to then go and do a name-based criminal history check, background check. So we put a fiscal note on this bill, but it wasn't, the fiscal note that was finally published by Legislative Council staff did recognize that there will be a workload increase for the Department of Education, but the conclusion of Leg Council was that we could absorb that within existing resources. And we asked for what is called a departmental difference. And so in the fiscal note did say that we estimate that the bill will increase our department expenditures by $57,000 and 1 FTE in 1920, and then just about that same amount going forward. And so we didn't feel that that was something that was absorbable. But then because they did work with us with that departmental difference, this is the language, this second bullet that they included is, the estimate assumes that the department will need additional staff to research, track, and record criminal histories for offenses. And then later, so they did say that if we could not absorb it, that it would result in a department budget request in the future. So that's one of the reasons
So there
that
you
this
are.
is bringing it to you all to proceed with that again. So it's not have to be absorbed within the existing activities that we're already doing.
And we do think this is going to be a substantial workload increase. This is a change that will require us to be tracking down an enormous amount of additional arrests and leads. And so,
But did this used to be required by CBI? And now we have to do it? I'm a little confused.
I'm not sure what the change was, and Colleen is out today, so we'll have to get back to you on that. But
Okay.
all we know is that it's a pretty different change to our current process, and we're going to be tracking down a lot of additional leads on this.
So I don't have all of the full understanding, but some things that I've heard Colleen discuss is that, many of the times it does have a final disposition on state offenses, but if there's local or municipal items that come up that show that there was arrest but no disposition, then that's something new that we would have to investigate, that we didn't
Okay,
have to
okay.
investigate previously.
And then out of state, is that done through CBI or through some sort of a interstate?
Yeah, I'm not positive on
Okay,
how
I'm just
that
curious.
works.
I'm just curious. I just think we
yeah.
need to be able to document.
Yeah.
Just Board Member Flores.
I don't mean to correct you, Commissioner, but I did some reading on that issue about the monies that came for licensing, and I was very concerned with the issue of the system. And when we got the outside contractor and all that, so I did some digging, and there are some other agencies that do not depend on their subsistence and existence through the monies that they collect. So indeed, I mean, it's been something I've always thought.
So it's a good topic for us to put on the agenda sometime.
Right.
Okay,
But
good.
it goes along with this, and that is, who brought it up? It was brought up at the legislature, I guess, when I first came on board, that it was a criticism of the department, of the board, that we were not taking action on so many felons that it was a budget committee, I guess it was a senator from my district that brought up the issue that we were just not looking deeply into, some of the people that we were hiring as teachers and such. So, I mean, that kind of, if indeed we're not, getting rid of people like that who are causing harm to kids and to the system, then it worried me that here I might be sued, as a board member, which I was concerned. So I looked deeper into it, and so there are agencies. And so I do think that we do need to ask for monies, more monies to run that department and to combine this with this. I think we could do that
Okay,
together.
okay, thank you, Board Member
That's
Flores.
just an idea.
I do, so I think you're probably right, there probably are some agencies that do fees differently, so I wasn't meaning to suggest that all agencies do it that way, so you're right there. I do just wanna make sure on the record that we say that, our licensing department tracks all, felons, there
Sure.
is no gap in that. We have never, not done that or dropped that off. That is something we would never, do. You may have heard complaints in terms of
Yes.
time for processing
long it took,
licenses.
right, yep.
And at one point, there was a fairly large lag.
Yeah, we had a
Um,
big
that's-
backlog.
That is true.
That
is
lag
a big
has,
backlog.
has dropped off.
That is true. And that was
completely.
5 years ago, 5 or 6 years
Right,
ago.
so we've
And-
corrected that problem.
Thank you.
Okay. So that concludes those two areas, and then again, we have the two statutory required.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm sorry, Board Member.
All right, Madam Chair, thank you very much. If this is not a good juncture to ask this question, I can certainly hold my question for later and perhaps even a later meeting, but I might be the only board member who's just now getting used to the process of having one of our fiscal notes not accepted or maybe rebuffed is maybe the word to use. Is there, and you used the term departmental difference. Is there a specific process by which we try to, I guess we just have to request it in the next budget cycle, is that right? We're just kind of a little bit out of luck on that one? How does that work? This is the first time I'm remembering seeing this as the newest board member. Thank you.
Yeah, it is fairly rare to have a departmental difference, I think. We work very closely with the Legislative Council staff and have developed a really great relationship with them. And so we work really well together. And so there are times where we come up with our estimate and they always do their own estimate. They take what we provide to them, but then they have to put their name on it. And so if they have a different look at something or a different perspective, that often we'll have a discussion about it and then come to some agreement saying, well, that's a good perspective, and so often it just gets resolved in something that we both agree on. And so that's why there's very few of these. In this case, this doesn't just affect the Department of Education, the Department of Regulatory Affairs and other agencies were also impacted. I understand they had, submitted decision items as well. So it was just a different perspective, so that we didn't ultimately come to agreement on. So it is not very common, but it happens.
So we no longer have, I'm just remembering, gifts, grants, and donations. Used to be that the majority of our boutique bills, if I can call them that, the grant bills, whatever,
Yeah.
the special things, because there was no money,
Mhm.
they were funded.
Yep.
You weren't told that you had to absorb it. It was gifts, grants, and donations, which, to my knowledge, practically never happened.
We still have several of those
we?
programs on the books.
On the books, they're
and
old
some
ones.
of them haven't. We've
Right.
never received those funds. That was something similar. We worked with the Joint Budget Committee analyst because there is a long bill line item. It's not specifically called gifts, grants, and donations, but we have a spending authority provided for that. And so we were able to get a little bit more flexibility in that because we do receive gifts, grants, and donations, typically grants, to my knowledge. And we were pushing up against that spending authority limit. So he did incorporate into the long bill some more flexibility for that. So if we do apply for grants and we are approved for those, that then we
We can
can
use them.
spend it without
Right.
going through the legislative
Right.
process. So, but we still do have a few that we've never received any gifts for.
So if I may, I would like to go back to our discussion yesterday when Ms. Mello provided us with a list of all the bills that are grants that we will be writing rules for and that the staff will be implementing, et cetera. Should we be planning to see what kind of a total cost that will be and maybe make an additional application in this cycle?
So we were cognizant of, for both the competitive grants staff and the grants fiscal staff who support all of these grant programs. We were very cognizant of those efforts. While it may be very minimal work, you know, if it's
For one.
80 or, 200 hours, well, that's absorbable. But if you have 10 of those, well, then that becomes, 2,000 hours, and that's an FTE. And so we did make sure that we put and did our estimate. So some of our fiscal note requests did say something like 140 hours for this. And so that is something that we are working on with the implementation of making sure that we do have the funding for that. And in many cases, we did get the funding that was not only for the grant, but for the program administration and then the back-end competitive grants.
So when you
and
get the
grants
grant
fiscal.
money, you can actually take a piece of it out for administrative cost?
Yes, and
Okay.
depending on the legislative language, some of those are up to 1% or up to 2% or up to 3%. So we did include that in many of the fiscal notes. And again, I haven't gone through all of them to make sure that it's total, but I think we should be in good shape because we worked to make sure that we included that in our fiscal notes.
Okay.
And not all of our fiscal notes get rebuffed.
Yes.
So.
Right. Well, I think yesterday we were worrying about little pieces and little pieces and little pieces and whether it would actually add up to an FTE in order to carry them out, and talking also about going back to look at our existing grants, then plus add what was passed this year. So I guess we'll wait
Yeah.
until that's completed and then
Yeah.
give that a budget look.
Yeah.
Okay, that'd be great, thank you.
And then I believe Ms. Oakes just has one other thing just to highlight for you. I don't think we need to go through it, but in the spirit of giving you an information item 1 month and then you vote on it the next month, we just wanted to highlight it's time of year for the staff at-will staff survey, staff salary survey update. As you recall, we kind of fell off the wagon in getting you guys to approve this every year, and so we're back on track.
We are on the wagon.
To approving this every year. So we've just put the draft in front of you, and we'll ask you to vote on it next month,
Can we put it on consent?
if you would like. Yes.
Is that okay? Yeah, it's
Yes.
right behind, it's at the end of the PowerPoint.
I'm looking at it as a separate account.
It is
Yeah,
separate.
it's a
It is
separate
separate,
attachment.
but if you still had your, if you
looks-
stapled your stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the change from what you approved last year is following, it's very similar to
2%.
last year. It's 2% increase for the minimum, the midpoint, and the maximum. And we were following the findings of the total compensation survey that was conducted by the Department of Personnel and Administration. So we're following along with what they're doing for the classified salary structure
Thank you.
based upon market research.
Thanks for keeping us out of trouble. We don't want to do that again. Yeah.
So we
Thank you very
will
much.
proceed to do additional work in both of the areas that we discussed.
Oh,
and
yeah.
refining
Any objections
those.
to the suggestions from staff for the budget?
Am I looking at the right?
Yeah, you are.
I think you are. There's-
Yes.
Yes, there you go.
6.2.
This one?
Yep, and that'll be on consent next month unless you have some concerns, but it really is just a 2% increase from what we approved last year. Whoops. So our next item is brain damage, so I'm wondering if we want to have a quick break?
Yeah.
No offense to you guys.
No, it's not your fault. It's not, we're grateful that you are trying to help us understand all this, but, so we're going to be going, this is 8.0, but we're also going to go back to yesterday's. Do you remember by any chance what the item was yesterday, folks? No, I don't remember either. Yeah. Yes.
It was item 10.01
I need to go back
yesterday.
for it. So some of your materials will be in that because we didn't finish yesterday.
God.
Okay, quick break.
We're here.
And it's been so long.
My head almost stopped hurting.
Yeah. Well, get ready. Huh?
So I think we're on page 24
24, yeah.
of our PowerPoint.
Yep.
So have mercy on us,
Okay.
but proceed.
Want us to go ahead and get started?
Uh-huh.
Okay. All right, so what we'll walk through right now, we actually have two items. The first one is we'll walk through the impact data from the on-track growth measure that we talked about yesterday in the TAP recommendation and walk you guys through that. And then if we get to the other conversation, this was the conversation that you shared with us around bringing some options for cut scores, the conversation that started in August with the board. So we brought some different I guess options would be one way to put it, for you to look at. But that was the other part that you requested. If for some reason it doesn't work today, we can certainly bring that back to you in June, if you guys prefer to do it that way. So we'll be very open.
June's not gonna be any happier, guys,
No, it's not. Just
because
right.
everything's gonna get, because there's a break and because school's just ending, so.
So we're prepared to go either way is what I'm saying. How's that? So
Thank you.
with that, I'm gonna go ahead and turn it back over to Marie and have her talk through the impact that the on-track growth measure as it has been recommended, how that would play out at this point, so.
Hello again, everyone. Thanks for being willing to sit through the rest of this presentation with us. Hopefully, we'll keep it fairly brief, but know this is kind of the impact data that you guys have, wanted to look at. So we want to make sure that we, share that with you and have an opportunity to get your thoughts on some of the different possibilities that exist and some, direction for moving forward. So, given the methodology that we talked through yesterday, if, and this is a big if, the board agrees to the TAP recommendations, sort of this is what the impact data of that would look like on the overall school and district ratings. So again, those things can be shifted from that front end, but then we'll need to come back to you with revised, impact data. But we wanted to walk you through this. So, anytime we would add a new performance indicator to the performance frameworks, we sort of have to shift around the weightings that are given to the existing indicators versus the new indicator. And so the relative weight that we give to this new indicator and how much is taken from the achievement and growth indicators sort of really determines how many schools we would see shift ratings under the current system. And so one of the things that we're bringing forward today is 3 different scenarios. So there's 3 different options for how the on-track growth metric could shift the overall weighting scheme. And I will say that, there actually are almost an infinite number of options, but we did sort of limit it down looking at, a fairly small proportion of points allotted to that on-track growth metric, partly because it is, a combination of the 2 existing achievement and growth metrics, but also because it is new, and I think everyone would feel more comfortable having it come in at a fairly low proportion of points. So we kind of were looking at between 5 and 10% of points, and then explored what would happen depending on where we took the points from the existing weighting schema. And so we're going to walk through those results in just a second, but I wanted to provide you with information on the TAP recommendation because we did spend quite a bit of time looking over this with the TAP and sort of discussing the implications of the different weighting scenarios. And so they unanimously opposed taking all the weight from the growth indicator, which would result in framework ratings that were more aligned with the achievement results and school and district demographics, but were supportive of taking either half or all of the weight from the achievement indicator, which results in ratings that were less aligned with the school and district demographics. And so we're actually going to walk you through those real fast, but I just sort of wanted to preface it with the TAP recommendations, if I can get it to move forward. So the first set of results we're going to look at is for the districts. And so we used mock 2018 data, and then using that new on-track growth metric, recalculated the framework ratings to see how much would shift. And so we have 3 scenarios. Under the first scenario, which is scenario A, it's 25% achievement, 35% growth, 10% on-track growth, and then 30% PWR. So this is one of those cases where on-track growth would be given 10 points, and it would take 5 points from achievement and 5 points from growth. So I call it sort of the balanced option. And what we see is that actually the majority of districts really would not be shifting ratings. And I think a lot of that really is a factor of, this metric is a combination of the two existing metrics. So it's fairly in alignment. So we would see about 170 districts who would get the same rating. 3 districts would move up 1 rating, and then 3 districts would move down 1 rating. And we also have provided, counts for the number that would go between the categories and then the demographic compositions of these schools. So you can see here that, the average percent for reduced lunch for the schools moving up is about 49%, and moving down it's about 46%. So it's actually,
Big deal.
it's not, it doesn't make much of a difference. That scenario pretty much carries forward sort of the existing weighting scenario that we have without any significant changes. Under scenario B, which would be 25% of the points coming from achievement, 40% from growth, and then only 5% on track growth, and then 30% continuing to come from PWR. So this one, you see all the points would be taken from achievement, but it is a smaller proportion of points. It's only 5 points. And again, if you have other alternatives that you want us to explore, just let us know. Because we have all the information, so it's easy to try different permutations. But this one just sort of seemed an easy place to start. And so under this scenario, again, we see 170 districts get the same ratings. So again, the impact is pretty minimal. 4 districts would go up, 2 districts would go down. And then under scenario C, which is sort of like scenario B, but the reverse, which is 30% of points from achievement, 35% from growth, 5% on track growth, and then 30% PWR. So in this case, the points will be taken away from the growth metric rather than the achievement metric. And so under this scenario, we have 174 districts who stayed the same. 0 districts moved up and 2 districts moved down. So I will say that the district results certainly show the least amount of change. And partly that's because of the influence of that PWR component and the fact that it is still given 30% of the total pie. And so it still carries a lot of the weighting.
And why are we not messing with that?
So we can explore that option. I did not want to presume that that is the direction you wanted to go in.
So, let me just clarify, for a high school, accountability.
Well, right now the on-track growth measure only applies to elementary and middle school. And so then when you roll it up into the district, it's like the way that the elementary, middle school, and high school results combine.
I don't know why at the district level we have 30% PWR when in fact the majority of the students, that's not a measure for them.
That is an absolutely valid question, and I think that we can
And at the high school, it
discuss
is
that.
30%.
Yes.
So it ought to be roughly a third.
Mm-hmm. I think so in the current rules, so the the old rules that we'll get to review and potentially revise this summer, it does currently say that growth and PWR must be given the greatest amount of weight, but I think that there is the opportunity for you guys to revise that. And probably I would say we'll just have to have more discussions.
When we're at 25% growth and 25% proficiency.
Achievement.
We're at achievement.
Mm-hmm.
We're definitely following that rule, and I don't know that
Yep.
this is what we struggle with all the time, that we're not measuring achievement.
And I think that is sort of the other conversation that we're going to have that can also be played out in that conversation where we talk about sort of the weightings and the cut points and the proportions of schools in each of the rating categories. I think for this particular purpose, for the on-track growth methodology, I think that the first place we just wanted to give you an idea of what the impact of it was. I think that if you don't feel comfortable sort of approving any giving weighting scenario, we can continue to have those conversations because there's not a big push at this point to get everything signed off on that on-track growth metric, we can wait and have a more considered discussion.
So scenario, I mean, if others have questions, but scenario C
Mhm.
really doesn't have much of an effect, but it does at least increase by 5%,
It does.
the achievement part.
Yes.
Remember what I said yesterday? I want those two pictures to start looking a little bit
Yes, but.
more aligned. Yeah.
But I think the B, scenario B, would have a better effect on most districts.
I think the concerns, and we had talked to you about this in a lot of your one-on-ones, and it's more obvious when we look at the school results. The concerns around that scenario C is that it tends to improve the outcomes for the less impacted districts and actually have a more negative impact on districts that have higher proportions of free reduced lunch and minority students, because that is, I mean, fundamentally that is the rub with weighting achievement more, is that it is more closely tied to student demographics.
See, that would be terrible for my district. That would be, you know,
That's
my
not how we're,
district.
that's not how we're
Well,
doing
I
your
know,
district
but-
and my district. It's
but-
about
but
getting
equity-
some
we're-
measures.
We're looking at equity here. And so if we think about equity, number 2 is really the one where we have growth, and we need to respect growth, because this is the growth that minority kids, poor kids, and homeless kids, and all these kids are going, you know, growth, we should respect growth, because that matters a lot. The other kids, you know, the C kids, or the C scenario, that's going to, those kids are gonna do okay in those districts, but it's going to impact a lot of negatively impact kids that, you know, need that need to grow, and those districts also.
We don't
that
have
are-
equity if we don't have children learning and becoming proficient.
We-
So please don't talk to me about how we
I
need to
have to talk
hide.
about
We
equity.
don't want to hide through the growth measure that they're not becoming proficient.
Well,
Board Member McClellan.
I just, thank you again so much for your patience and taking time with me to help me get up to speed and understanding how manipulating one lever has impacts across the whole picture. If I understand correctly, my hope out of this, and I speak only for myself, but maybe others will agree, that we'll have a little bit more fidelity, or maybe a lot more fidelity, when it comes to recognizing that right now we have a whole bunch of students who may be experiencing growth, but not fast enough that they're going to reach proficiency. And yet the picture in terms of how our schools are doing looks almost dishonest, because it's looking like we have almost all the schools looking pretty good, or almost all the districts looking pretty good, where if you scratch the surface, some of those very districts that don't look like they need additional attention from us have a whole lot of students who, even if they are experiencing growth, it's not sufficient for them to reasonably expect to become proficient.
Well-
So if I may,
Just a minute.
is there any of these scenarios that is getting us a little bit closer to having a little bit more fidelity between those measures?
So
Is
let
there
me-
one that, or is there one of these that stands out as we're starting to not have that disconnect between students who really need more attention, or we at least need to be able to recognize that we have a problem, and districts in school looking like there's no problem at all? Is there one of these that's sort of pulling us a little harder toward having those be better
Commissioner?
connected?
Okay. So I think the challenge that we're having is that there are so many components to the accountability frameworks that could get us there. And so we've been sort of systematically walking you through all the different components. The very first component we walked you through was what a growth to target metric might look like. And that's what we spent the majority of time on yesterday. And we presented essentially 2 options for you. One option was the TAP recommendation, which was sort of a 3-year time frame to get there. then we presented another option that was more of a 2-year time frame to get there. Now, whichever of those metrics you choose will have some impact on this.
Exactly.
Then you have another choice to make. You have weighting options, which are presented here, which is sort of where do you take those points out of, and that impacts those pieces. Then sadly, you have third and fourth choices to make, which is where the cut points are in each of the frameworks. Each one of those choices that you make have cascading effects on the other choices. And that's why this gets complicated. And that's why we've, maybe we haven't done it in the right way, but because of the complexity, we've been trying to educate you guys in sort of one metric at a time so that you understand one metric, and then you can make a good judgment on that metric, and then you can move on to this other discussion. So it's not as easy as just saying, there are, as they said, infinite numbers of options we could put in front of you. And if we got to the PowerPoint we had for today, you would see a cut point PowerPoint that would also push this to be more alignment, to closer alignment if we get there.
So Board Member Flores, we are not going to make the decision today, so please don't
but I just
be
wanted
concerned.
to make a couple of points. And this is something I learned in Washington last week. We are one of those districts, we are one of those states that is not equitable by a long shot. We are down there. And if we don't do things, we don't spend money on our minority kids.
How is this helping this?
There is this discussion.
Oh, please.
There is this research that just came out from Georgetown. I keep talking about it. I don't think anybody's read it. And that research and that study says that we are just really, what's the word to use about what we're doing to Latino kids in this state? It's not a nice word, but that's what we're doing to them. And they're not going to college. They are not succeeding. We have them mainly as manual workers, and to believe that they can't learn. I think that people are misunderstanding this business of that they'll stay there according to a test. That doesn't mean that they're not going to learn and that their life is going to be, that we have to give up on them. We can't give up on them. We have to spend money on those kids, those poor kids in early childhood, and I mean 3 and 4, probably 0 through 4 years old. We need to spend monies in this state on those kids. And it's a sin, it's sinful, it's immoral that we're not doing it. We need to spend monies on K through 12. We're not spending it. We are way down there.
Board Member Flores, can we get back to this?
Yes, that's why I'm saying that we can't do C. C would be terribly
Well, I
immoral.
retract that.
Maybe,
Can we just get on with it?
and then you're wanting kids to do it maybe a little faster. So, the in-between would be the 2 years. Maybe A would be, and then we'd get all these districts in here that we're going to have
Board Member
to
Rankin.
spend all our time.
We need to
So
move-
all
we
I'm
need to move
saying
on.
that would probably be the fairer part. So don't tell me that you know all about, what's the term? Because I think that if we do 3, we are just going to be, doing
You
a
may be right,
terrible
but how
thing.
about you let us get through this?
Okay.
And then we'll talk
I know
about it.
I'm right.
So
Board Member
Marie,
Rankin.
when I was listening the last time, when we got together,
It's not
the
equitable.
time, this doesn't look real familiar, but that
'Kay.
doesn't necessarily mean anything. But I thought we were talking about 60% growth, 40% academics. At least that's the way it was before. So this looks a lot different. I definitely have
Are you-
Chairman Schroeder's concern about 30% that stays consistent maybe I'm thinking of another piece of the pie, but I
So I think we
Board Member
reviewed
Rankin, go to the next page.
the schools with you, and that's the one that you're thinking about.
Yeah.
So the districts, because of the PWR requirement,
okay.
but I think we spent most of our time in actually our one-on-ones with all of you, looking at the schools.
And not
We
And the
touched
districts
briefly on
was-
the
yeah.
districts.
So,
Yes.
so this,
So that
Given as a
this,
handout.
what we're looking at now is a district, and,
Mhm.
so, now you've really confused me. So,
Okay.
one we would do from this page, but we still have to do one, so, okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
And I would probably say, in theory, it would be nice if there was consistency between sort of the district decision and the school decision. But.
Bingo. Bingo.
No, that would be too easy. Okay,
Um,
thank you.
Mhm. But we did spend more time looking at the school results, so want to make sure that we look at these real fast, at least before you can. Okay.
So, so real quick, Board Member McClellan, in answer to your question, one of the things that we did find when we were looking at the on-track growth measure is it does not have the impact that significantly moves schools out of performance into improvement, and that because it's so closely related to no matter how you really no matter how you slice it, it still relates directly to achievement and to growth. And so it doesn't have major impacts like some of the other tools that you have at your disposal when you're actually looking at shifting some of those percentages. So one of the other parts of this discussion, because this is a huge discussion, is also around the conversation that you're in right now is truly your conversation as a state board around what do you all believe to be the purpose of school and district performance frameworks, and then how do you want that to be laid out. So that's truly the conversation that you're in. Commissioner Anthus laid it out. I mean, we spent a lot of time talking about how do we go through this conversation because this is such a big conversation. And so we're really taking it bites at a time, trying to ensure that that we give you the best information that we can give you. So we do understand that, but I don't know whether that helps or not, but that's really kind of where we're coming from with it.
And I think, again, we have time, so this can be sort of an ongoing conversation, and we can follow up on any of the, the points that you all have raised today and sort of the concerns that come out of this. And as Alan had said, around, it's about a value statement for Colorado and how we want the performance frameworks to actually function and sort of which schools we're identifying and for what purposes. So I think that is a much bigger conversation that we'll get to have for quite a few months.
Put on the tickler list to look at PWR for district.
Okay.
And whether how heavy that really should be.
Okay.
Since it only is measured for a third of the students.
Yep. Yeah, and I think
Mr.
that'd
Barron?
be helpful.
Putting all the technicalities aside, because I have to admit being lost in them, if we were to suggest an objective,
Mhm.
and then let's say the objective was to design a system within the law that governs the percentage of what you must use, that most accurately reflects student performance in district and school performance ratings. And if that were a broad objective, then could you bring us a proposal that accomplished that objective?
I think I might need a little more information about what that objective would actually look like, and if it's about sort of the comments you have made around the proportions of students being considered proficient or advanced, aligning more closely with the schools or districts that are given performance ratings. But I think that there are definitely some options that we could explore and that we could bring to you.
Is dealing with these in the sort of the parts as opposed to the whole, I think will make it very difficult for us because the cut score piece could be used to achieve some of that objective that I think Ms. McClellan was talking about, which is, should, and I don't think Dr. Flores wants, but should these, what we're trying to do is just paint a picture. We're not saying the picture is just or fair. We're just saying it's happens to be what the landscape, how it actually appears. So if that's our if there's a majority for that objective, you know, could you bring us a whole package that achieved that objective?
So I think within that conversation, I think it would be helpful to have some guidance from where you all would want to start.
There'd be a lot of refinement, I think,
Right.
but I mean, we're lost in a series of decisions, not fully understanding the impact of each one on the whole.
I think what we would have to do, and we can go back and maybe re-strategize. You know, we tried this approach, it might not be working.
No, I
but-
think it could work.
Yeah.
I'm just
But I think what
curious.
we definitely need to know from you, I think why they're hedging, is because the definition of student performance is different for different people. Some people want student performance to mean more weight on proficiency according to our benchmarks, and some include student performance in our Colorado growth model. How much are you growing students? And so we would want a little more.
I understand that, but at some point, and I don't know how everybody feels about this, but at some point, either the kid can read or he can't.
Yeah, we can get most kids.
So
And-
Mr. Dillon has the best description of what we should be getting, except that we're not, which is that if we have high growth, we should be seeing significant increases in achievement.
But our growth rates
And
are
it ain't
not
happening,
high
and we
enough.
can't
Right.
figure it out.
The growth rates are not high enough to achieve proficiency.
Maybe that's it, but that's,
And
that,
that I think-
therein
And
lies
have
the
we
answer.
I think
to
I
this.
did get
And
that
have
from
we
the
had
last
enough
briefing. It
time
made
on-
sense.
And have we had enough time on this test? Do we have the right curricula? Do we have the textbooks that really?
That's, that,
No, I'm sorry,
Now,
but
Dr. Flores,
that's
you're-
important. Do the teachers have the tools?
you're
And do we
confounding our
have enough
efforts here.
time on this test that kids know it? Do kids have computers? Can kids really work computers? And has anybody done it where they take a paper and pencil test and then a computer test? And which one, you know, is better? There's a lot of ways to look at this. There's a lot of issues that, you know, that go into this.
That is after we figured out how to do the measure. We don't pick the measure based on what's
So,
out there.
let
We
me
do
ask
the
you
measure
this.
and then we figure out
Which
why.
one did the TAP people choose? Did they
So-
choose one?
The TAP had a preference for either scenario A or scenario B. They did unanimously oppose scenario C.
Thank you.
That was one I picked, though.
Yes, I think the district perspective on this is very different. They very strongly express their belief in growth and the fact that that is what most accurately captures the work that they're doing with their students, so that it's not based upon sort of their student's starting point, but what the system is actually contributing. And again, I think that's kind of where we're going to have some more conversations.
The problem with the growth model is that it is normed.
There
So
are
it
some
just-
options to baseline it in a way that we could get away from the
Well,
norm
that's another
changing.
thing,
cut
that's,
score it.
that's
We could-
another
we could get
way
it to
to
proficiency.
approach that, so that what Mr. Dillon says
Mhm.
turns out to be true, that there is
Right.
enough growth that there is actually achievement. Right now, what we're seeing on some of this stuff is, that's not,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
not how it is.
I think Dr. Flores masking
I'm
the
not,
lo-
I'm not
masking
asking
the-
to mask it.
masking
I'm
the
just,
lack of achievement at the end is a disservice to the students.
well, just because those high-end students cannot go further, doesn't mean that we have to, you know, put the, we have to put those kids, if they grow, those poor kids and those minority kids. You know, just because, you know, rich kids don't grow enough or don't grow at all, or just the stasis and keep at this, that means that those teachers should be really working with those students to make them grow, instead of just staying at a level that they'll be there
I believe
for
we
4
all
years.
agree with you.
The other thing I
Oh,
think
please,
is that
please.
we have to really think about equity. We really have to think about, and we as board members need to go across the street and really have some bills already done for those people to help our minority kids. Because they're not going to grow if we're just not going to put the effort, the monies into getting that growth. If teachers don't have the tools, if we're not spending money in education, we leave it at the very end. Look at what happened this year.
Please make a suggestion, Commissioner.
I'm
This
sorry.
needs to stop.
No, it doesn't need to stop. People need to listen and hear
This
that
is-
we're not
And I think
spending on
it's
education,
similar to what
that we
we're
have a
spending
state
Too much.
that is not,
We're spending way too much.
we're spending we're not spending
Commissioner?
enough.
Um,
If you
Commissioner,
look
My-
at other states.
My suggestion, just based on
Right.
where we are in time and the day we've had, might
not
be
equitable.
for
Which would
us
mean
to
shifting
come
out
back
more to
together
go
as a
to
team, put some options together that provide you a holistic approach of what all of these different decisions could look like in multiple options for you, with sort of the value set underlying each one. So, you know, a set where we have something where we have a certain percentage of growth, but we put it all together in a package for you so that you don't have to take each one of these individually. Would that sort of help move the conversation forward rather
I think
than?
if we can stay on this model
I think the way they're
without
doing
the
it's fine.
distraction of our personal values about something completely different, it would help if you would if we could just focus on what
Equity
we.
is a value that
But
we
that's
should-
not the
we
topic
should
at the
value.
moment. That's not the topic at the moment.
Well, it should be.
Well, I'm sorry, but there's an agenda, and we surely should talk about that, but right now, we are trying to understand this model. It's very hard.
Democracy is based on equity.
They wanna know what we want, should we go around
I kinda like to let them finish.
We need to think some more.
And
So
talk
I
less.
wonder if we go ahead and go into the models of the
I
school.
think you're doing fine.
And we'll talk about, because that's what you guys are most familiar with. We didn't spend as much time on the district component of this when we went through with our one-to-one meetings. So we'll talk through the school component and kind of share with you the impact that will have.
Could
Yes,
I have a
ma'am.
front-end question on this?
Absolutely.
So what we're leaving now is the districts, and in the districts, it includes PWR. We're
Yes.
going into schools, but only elementary and middle school.
Yes.
Thank you.
Exactly.
Exactly. So because the on-track growth measure at this point is only applicable for CMAS grades 3 through 8, we did focus for the schools on the impact data for elementary and middle schools. And so these are the ones that the current weighting is 40% achievement and 60% growth. And so we sort of allotted that same 10% of points to on-track growth and then tried out the 3 scenarios. So the first one where 5 points come from achievement, 5 points come from growth. And this is the one that we talked through with most of you, that, you know, it's still the vast majority of schools who are receiving the same rating. So there's 1,235 elementary and middle schools that would stay the same rating. 13 schools would go up and 20 schools would go down. We did include the percent free reduced lunch for this information so that you can see under this scenario, the schools are of fairly similar impact, 71% and 62% free reduced lunch that are moving, and so it doesn't really have much of a net impact. Under scenario B, where the points would come from achievement, so that means that the model overall would be slightly more weighted towards growth. We would see, 1,218 schools receiving the same rating. 28 schools would see a bump up in rating, and for those schools, the average percent for reduced lunch is 76.3%. So that is the more impacted schools would get a little bit of a boost. And then the schools that would move down a rating, there were 22 of them, and their average percent for reduced lunch was 44.1%. So this is, to what the TAPS conversation had been around, which is this model weights growth a little more heavily, which makes the ratings slightly less aligned with demographics. Again, that's something for you guys to consider and discuss at future meetings. And then for scenario C, which is 40% growth, 40% achievement, 50% growth, and then 10% for that on-track growth. We would see here 1,221 elementary and middle schools staying the same, with 8 schools increasing proficiency levels or performance ratings. And of those 8 schools, like their average percent for reduced lunch is 40%, so they're less impacted schools. And then for the 39 schools that would be moving down, we would see that their average percent for reduced lunch is 76%. So again, this all gets into how the entire model is weighted. Will have varying impacts depending on the demographic composition of the school, so that just needs to be considered in our conversations.
Could you guys maybe, would it be possible, I know you guys did a great job, I mean, you did. And would it be possible if you guys could bring maybe a couple of the people on tap at our next meeting? And so that they can talk to us about the variables and such, and how they came about and why they probably
Member Flores,
chose
how
A
about we
and
do
B.
that toward the end after we really understand all the different pieces?
Well,
Not a bad idea.
I think if you listen to these people, and why they're doing
I'm not
what they're
disagreeing with
doing.
you. Please listen to me.
And-
I am
and I
saying
think
that
it would
when
be
we all
helpful.
understand this and have gone through it, would be great to have them come and have us listen to them. But right now, we are all at different places of absorbing all this, and so we're gonna have different questions than we would have
Well,
otherwise. That's all.
I was
Please.
just speaking about my experience, because when I first came on
Can we,
board,
can,
I went to the TAP meetings, and I attended the TAP meetings, and they were so helpful. They were incredibly helpful.
could we allow Ms. Hutchinson to continue, please?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
And thank you for your consideration of my request.
So having provided you with that information about sort of the schools and the districts and the current scenarios and framework, just sort of wanted to. I think we've gotten a lot of your feedback already, actually. So I don't know that we'll. How much more of a discussion you guys want to be having about this today. I think that, as Commissioner Anthony had said, that we can go away and have some strategizing sessions and figure out what information to come back and present to you to sort of guide this conversation, and acknowledging, Dr. Flores, and trying to get some of the perspectives of members of the field, because I think that you're going to hear it. You're going to hear their perspectives anyway.
That's right, yes. Can you explain this next?
Yes.
Can I ask just one
Yes.
quick question? How do you find the average of free and reduced lunch by the school? Is it the school population?
So, in this particular case, now I have to go and find out. Josh had actually run the numbers for me, and I had just pulled them. I think it's actually the overall proportion of students who are free reduced lunch across all of the schools. So in essence, it's a weighted N. So larger schools and smaller schools contribute differently.
So you take all the small schools that have the same number of children, and you take their free and reduced, and that's the average of.
So
I think it's big and small.
Up in all of the schools, so add all of the students up, and then see what percentage of all of those students altogether are
that
eligible for free and
school.
reduced over a group of schools. So if you have 10 schools in a group, you add all of the students up in those 10 schools, and then see what percentage of those students are eligible for free or reduced lunch overall.
So if you
So
had
then how are
Denver,
we doing, I guess I'm confused between the district and the school, how the weighting is done on that.
And it would be the same process for the districts as well. It's just adding up larger groups of students that are within districts.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, great. So it's nothing with the whole state.
No.
Okay.
Right.
Thank you.
So in reference to the graphic that you were asking about, so one of the things that we did to try to visualize the impact of the different weighting scenarios and what can happen, one of the members of my team created this awesome Tableau tool where you can sort of pick the different scenarios and really see what impact it has, and then dig deeper if you want to actually explore which schools moved, how much they moved, and looking to see, under the different scenarios, what are the outcomes and how do they compare? And so we wanted to offer that as an option if you guys want to dig deeper. I think everyone else who's seen the tool has been like, this is so fun, like just to play with it. But so we wanted to make sure that we offered you that opportunity. I know we're a bunch of nerds. I can see you laughing at me,
so
but
is this
yes.
a district? Is this a district picture and these are the different schools and where they go?
So this is actually a picture. This particular visual is from a school, but we have the districts and the different school scenarios all available within that tool. And then for a bunch of different weighting scenarios beyond the 3 that we provided with you today, we went and explored many other options that either have bigger impacts, and we went all the way up to 20% on track growth, and what would that look like? And so with the TAP, we reviewed a good many, like at least a dozen different scenarios, and then sort of had winnowed that down to the 3 that we had presented to you to try not to overwhelm you with potential possibilities.
So we can, how many more do you have on this one?
No, we're done.
Slides? Okay.
Yep, just the
Next page.
So I have a suggestion. We can, first of all, give you that tool, and we can do some phone conversations with you to walk you through the tool so you understand what it is if you want. I would suggest we load up the other PowerPoint. I know this is dangerous, but just to talk about one slide to prep you for the next conversation.
I agree.
And so the one slide I wanted to review was slide 5 of the next presentation. And I don't think we're going to go through this whole presentation, but we'll at least just suggest what this next presentation was going to talk to you about. And so maybe you could review it, and then our staff can answer any questions, and then we can be more prepared in June and maybe make sure that these sessions are in the morning when we're more fresh in June. But the next presentation essentially comes down to this slide, which is that, as I said, you have a cascading set of decisions to make. You have the on-track growth metric decision to make, and that was what we talked mostly about yesterday. You have the weighting decision to make, which is what Marie just went through with you now. And then this other leverage point is probably your biggest leverage point for bringing things more into alignment, as you have discussed with us before. And that is adjusting the cut points for the rating levels. And so that's what you see in this slide. We have presented to you what the current cut point is, and then what would happen if you raised the rigor of the cut point by each point. And so you have what would happen if you raised it by 1 point, what would happen if you raised it by 2 points, down to 6 points. And so that's what this slide articulates. And then you see how things fall out. So this was going to be our next presentation today. And I would suggest maybe you guys look through the PowerPoint and look through this. And then in June, we can maybe show you how it all comes together.
I'm going to say one clarifying thing. This is the cut point between performance and improvement, performance levels,
Doesn't go
and
to the
not
other one.
anything else.
Right. And I think we heard that. So if we go all the way back to when we had a work session with you, and we tried to get grounded in what our values were for this, we heard from you that maybe you wanted more alignment with the performance category. So what we now call the yellow category. And so that's where we have adjusted the cut points to, essentially more schools, because this is increasing the rigor, more schools would probably move into the improvement category. I'm sorry.
It's late.
And so, we didn't adjust all the cut points at the very lowest level, like turnaround and priority improvement, and we didn't adjust the cut points at the very highest level of distinction. And
But Dr. Hess, shouldn't you adjust all of them
Maybe.
as a practical matter?
it depends, because when you talked to us at the work session, we did talk about the implications that, if you have lots more in turnaround and priority improvement, then what are the services that we have? What are the resources we have? Whereas many increasing the improvement band suggests, I'm getting tired too. What we heard in terms of your alignment was that you didn't want to, when a parent or a community member sees green, which is performance, they might assume everything is great.
Yeah.
And while some good things may be happening, there's much more there's much more improvement that could be made. So what we thought to start with, if you move more, if you have schools that still show you need to improve, so they're now in a yellow category, that's more reflective of what you guys talk about, which is we may see high growth, but we're not getting to achievement, and so you still have improvement to make. So let's communicate that rather than let's communicate that you're at performance 100%. So we just started with increasing that improvement band.
And since we're talking about, kind of showing reality, could we, or maybe it already does, a report card that goes to parents. I know that the test is normed. What if we showed
The test is
where
not normed.
the test is normed?
CMAS is normed?
Seem
CMAS is criterion based.
criterion based?
Yeah.
So they do know where.
Yes. And it's a pretty comprehensive report for the parent for CMAS.
Yes.
And, well, but even so, 89.
It's the growth factor that is normed.
Yes.
But do they know how far away they really are from being at
Proficient?
proficient?
And I think we talked about that yesterday, and the importance of creating a report for schools and ideally to share with parents that demonstrates sort of where the students are starting out with their performance level, how much growth they're making, and where that's anticipated to take them, and if it will be
Right.
enough or not. So
But
I think we're going to add that in.
I think we need to be
Definitely.
careful in saying that they're just not going to grow. They're not going to get to level 4 or whatever if they start at 1. Somebody's going to start at 1, and people do grow.
Yep.
So we need to be very careful in how we state that reality, or they're not going to grow. But there was also that problem, I know, with not the every student succeeds, and the problem with the test that we had before, or how we were assessing students in the, what was it called? Every child needs to
No
succeed.
Child Left Behind.
Every child left behind, where, I'm sorry. I mean, you have to think about where we are with the testing and with every child left behind. You had these schools that were at 99%, but they just hadn't grown to 99.5% to show that they had grown, and so
Isn't there a
they
button on
were
her?
faulted. And so, you need to remember the history of all this testing.
So we're not on history.
We're testing.
We're on
Well,
testing
history
and
of
on
testing,
measure-
history
No,
of
thank
testing,
you.
but we have
are-
to take that into account. We can't forget history of testing.
I'm
And if
happy
we go back to
forget
the
it.
20s, that's where you guys are thinking. You're thinking back in the 20s. And what happened back in the 1920s.
Madam,
in the
Board Member
1910s.
Goff.
Goff has had her hand up.
I know. I mean, I didn't know, but please.
Can you use your mic, Jane? Thanks.
Microphone, please.
Oh, yes.
I mean,
Quick reminder to self. As you've told us a couple times, we're talking here about schools. So when we talk about improvement, a single student, an individual student is a little different matter. But I guess where my head is right now is we're taking a whole school building. And I don't know if you can answer it. I ask a lot of those type of questions, for which I apologize. However, I can't help it. So if you're talking about a school building and you're saying there is, maybe a little prep period, a little awareness ahead of time and such for the leadership, at least of the school, to know so that they'll be ready for their parent messaging. and staff. But how do you see that changing? What would have to be, Alan, I mean, you've probably been the closest there most recently. What will it be like to have to say to a group of parents in a school building that's gone from performance to improvement?
So here's what I would share in the conversation that you had with us when we did our workshop, and I'm going to go back to what Dr. Anthus was talking about earlier. So one of the things you talked to us about was how as a state are the performance frameworks signaling to schools, parents, districts, how schools are doing, right? This is about signaling where schools are at. So I think I have some good friends in the field. And we've talked about this. So if I'm a superintendent in a district, and right now I'm sitting with a bunch of schools that are green, and we shift these numbers, and this is important. This is important. If we shift some of these percentages, we could see a number of schools that drop from green to yellow. I want you to hear me say that that could have a negative impact on, and I'm not saying we shouldn't do it. I'm saying I want you to hear the perspective from the field. This could have a negative impact on the work a superintendent and some very good superintendents have been doing in districts. Now, I also think there are superintendents, I know, there's superintendents that I've talked to that actually would say, you know what, we do feel like we have some schools that probably are maybe in that performance category, and maybe having a way to signal to them that their school is maybe an improvement school. Being an improvement school does not, unfortunately, whenever we label something, that creates a challenge, right? So that signaling that, and that's the value statement that we keep talking to you, and that's why and Commissioner Anthus stated it very succinctly when she said, the reason they're hedging, and that is the reason that we're hedging a little bit. Yes, there's many models that could be developed, but it's really important, do we, as a state with your leadership, where do you want to go with that? And so that's really the crux of this conversation. I wish I could make it easier than that, but from a very purist perspective, yes, there are schools out there that may have some districts out there that have some schools at performance that will drop to improvement. It may make it a bit more challenging for some superintendents. I'm not going to sugarcoat that. There are also superintendents, though, that would say, you know what, we recognize that, and that is a way for us to signal, hey, we need to make some shifts. So I don't know that that answered your question, but because see, sometimes I don't really answer people's questions, so.
I get it.
So percentage-wise, how would they, what's the percentage of superintendents that would want the change, or?
You know what, I don't have a sense of percentages. All I can tell you is conversations that I have with
Okay.
you know,
Let me
colleagues
let
that I
people
have in the field that I
ask
still have very
questions.
close connections with. So it's a very real thing.
Thank you.
Board Member Rankin.
What percentage of these superintendents, Mr. Dillon, would say, I don't want to change at all, just leave us alone?
Way too many.
You know what, I actually would push back a little bit on that and say, you know what, we have some very good practitioners in the field here in Colorado. Overall, Colorado is not, I mean, when you look at us compared to the nation, excuse me, I can't speak, obviously. But you know what, Colorado is not a horrible state for education. We do fairly well nationally. We have quality practitioners in the field. They're very knowledgeable. We have some tremendous leadership in the field. We have a vast diversity of professionals in the field that do their work. We are all faced with different challenges. I've done this work for a number of years, and so, you know, I worry if our focus is on, we have educators who care. We truly have educators who care.
Mr.
Okay,
Dillon,
I would
40% of our third graders read.
That's not exactly true.
Read proficiently, read
Yes.
on grade level.
I
So
we gotta be
they-
careful with that.
We just can't keep saying how great we are. I'm sorry, but
So 40% are at a high bar on grade level that measures multiple pieces: reading, writing, and communication. So I do want to be careful that our CMAS scores are not a straight literacy score. There is work to be done, but I just, you know, it doesn't mean that only 40% of our students read.
That's right.
Dr. Hans, can I, as long as we're just rambling, I'd like to ask a question.
And I am very nervous about rambling.
Yeah. But if that cut score doesn't reflect the reading level that is needed, whatever, at what that level is, if it's reflecting something beyond what is a necessary expectation, then should we look at adjusting that? I mean, there could be two reasons why things don't square. One is the standard, you know, and we would all be accused of lowering the standard and would probably get us all yelled at by some groups. But if the standard is unreasonable, then we should adjust it. So, and is there a way to determine whether the standard is reasonable, and if so, how it would be adjusted?
So yes, that is a whole other conversation.
It's one of the other moving parts.
It's another moving part for sure. Our standards right now are set to the NAEP standards, and so so I would not say that it's an unreasonable standard. I'm just saying it's a high standard, and that we are aligned with the national, you know, test.
And the
that
NAEP
we look.
standard is based on sort of an international competency.
We'd have to do I'd have to get the assessment leaders down here. I don't think it's international, but the point being, I think there's a point. All I was saying with Dr. Schroeder is that when she stated only 40% of our kids read, I'm not sure that's an exaggeration, and I'm just trying to stick to, you know, I don't want to sort of inflame the debate. Thank you.
So how about 50%, 50% of
That's your
the
job.
fourth graders in Massachusetts are proficient compared to our 40%? Does that, I mean, we can't keep pretending like everything is okay and that it'll discourage folks. I want to encourage and push where needed.
And I 100% respect that. We don't want to rest on our laurels.
That's our job.
We need to continue to improve the work that we do with kids.
right.
I will argue that all day long. I agree with you. How we go about it and what messages we send, I think, are critical to the conversation. So, and again, I think it's your value set that helps us drive that. So that's really all that I'm getting at.
And also we need to really think about these kids that really need the help. And we need to think about working and how to help those kids. And this is where I'm talking about equity.
Board Member
Help
Rankin,
those-
did you have your hand up?
Yeah.
These kids.
I was wondering, and I don't mean this disrespectfully, but what's the impetus to why we're doing this now, right now? I mean, is there a new law that says we have to have growth to standard? Or,
So it's actually not a new law. It's always
Which
been SB 163. Thank you. I'm also finding it to be late afternoon. So we had an on-track growth measure from 2010 until 2014, but then due to the assessment transitions over to CMAS, we had to take a hiatus because we did not have all the information necessary to run on-track growth.
okay, so, but we did have growth before this.
Yes.
Or before that. So if we just take that segment of time out, we're just doing what we've done before.
Correct.
And your superintendents have seen this before, so this isn't gonna be anything new to them.
Unless they're new,
Thank
unless they
you for
haven't been
that.
part of the system.
Right.
That was my question.
And they didn't like the old version, so you all are trying to find a
Better version.
better version.
And are we
Yes.
trying to find, sometimes it seems like we're looking at the end point and doing all this stuff in order to align with our end point. Are we doing a process to get to something we already know? You know, our academic, let's just look at the academic, well, you know, some schools are performance, yet the kids aren't doing well, this has to align more, so we'll go back and kind of obfuscate a lot of stuff so that that can also reach whatever that end point is. That sometimes it seems like we're doing that to me.
Board Member Rankin, I think we're trying to be responsive of what the board has asked us, which is they want more alignment in our performance frameworks
Some board
between
members.
some board
Yes.
members.
Yes.
And so we have used that plus the statutory requirement we have to add this metric, plus the fact that we have to open these rules because of new legislation.
Mhm.
Because of all three of those things, we are having all of these discussions. And the challenge is our accountability system and frameworks are complex. They have multiple metrics, multiple indicators with multiple cut points. And so it is a complex discussion that we have started, and we are trying to get your value set. And as you've heard today, your value set is a little bit different. And so we are trying to provide you chunked options that would address different types of value sets so that you can discuss that and make a determination. And it's a complex discussion. So my recommendation is, again, to close this right now, because I
Thank
think
you.
we're all tired. I think
Yes.
this is complex. And I think we need to go back and figure out some more simple ways to explain this to you, and some more simple ways to show you the impact on the complete system. And we will
That's
try
what we
to
want.
do that. But I do want you all to hear, you all are tell us some different things, so then we're managing that to try to show you different things. So I would recommend we close this session out right now,
Thank you.
and we come back at a later date.
Thank you.
Since history is maybe that important, I want to remind us why we got 163. We got Senate Bill 163 because we had 3 different measures for our parents. One of them was the test, which said one thing. No Child Left Behind, which very often said your school is not, what was the word? Your school
Is really not helping minority kids.
It wasn't just about, your school is a bad school because it doesn't meet, because there are all these requirements. Then there was the CSAP, and then there was the Irwin Award that said you were a great school, and parents would get letters for all 3 of those. And so there was a decision made that we would try to get one accountability measure. And we are struggling now with trying to figure out how best to have that one accountability measure.
Right. And we're having more kids commit suicide. And we have more kids that have terrible self-concepts on top of being poor.
Okay, let's get
being-
to item number 9. Next item on our agenda is an information update regarding Code of Ethics and Charter School appeal process. Commissioner, thank you very much, folks. Sorry we are off the rails.
Yes, so, Madam Chair, thank you. I'm gonna actually, Ms. Tillotson was not feeling well, so she left. So Mr. Peters is going to brief us on this.
So I'm going to try to be very quick with this. I think we're running a little past our scheduled time. Is that right?
Yes.
We are.
So I'll be fast. I'll start with the Code of Ethics because it's the very simple one. It has not been updated in about 9 years. In that time, the underlying statutes have been changed, and most importantly, your Code of Ethics used to recommend that you go talk to the Secretary of State and get an advisory opinion if you had questions about an ethics dilemma, whether or not you were allowed to do something. That statute doesn't exist anymore. The Secretary of State is no longer allowed to give you an advisory opinion, so we thought we'd stop telling you to go ask. We took that out of the Code of Ethics. Past that, there's no important change anywhere in here.
Should we ask?
You don't get to ask anybody.
No,
the co-
there's a committee.
This now says go talk to a lawyer. You're not covered by the Independent Ethics Commission, so unfortunately you can't go ask
we're not?
them. And that's why the Secretary of State's statute was deleted, because the IEC replaced the Secretary, but
How
you're
do
not
we
covered.
escape the independent ethics commission?
Because you don't get paid to be here.
It's not all about money. This is the
Yeah,
thing they
right,
say
says
about
people who have
testing,
what
it's
they
not
want
all
are very
about
often
school.
proud of telling
So if
people
we
who
have a
haven't what
question,
they
go
want.
to an
They
attorney.
really don't
Yep.
want it.
Tip you.
Yep, not us. Talk to an attorney who's allowed to advise you in your individual
Individual
personal capacity.
And you'll
But
pay for it,
at-
right?
I don't believe so.
Go ahead, Joe.
What
That
would be a
might be an
question
ethics
that we could have asked before that we can't ask now?
That you could have asked the Secretary of State.
Yeah, before.
That tends to be about, financial conflicts for the most part. So whether or not you're allowed to serve on the board of some corporation and then vote on a contract here that would potentially redound to the benefit of that corporation. Financial conflicts, maybe some family conflicts.
So
I-
this could come here. I serve
Yeah.
on a board that
Mhm.
I think gets grants from the Department of from CDE,
Mhm.
That's an
and
issue.
I'm supposed to maybe vote on it,
No.
and I would have to recuse myself,
Should.
but I haven't, well, I agree, but
You should.
would I go to you?
I would strongly suggest that you talk to an attorney about that.
Talk to your
You.
husband.
No, we can't advise you in your personal capacity.
So is this just cleaning that up?
Yeah. All we did was
I'll charge
delete a
you
reference
third
here.
since I only had a year of law school, though.
The Attorney General advises the board. We don't advise you in your individual capacity.
And how was that bar exam?
I don't know, I never got that far. I'm sure it would have been a sniz.
So.
Any
what-
other question on that topic? We're done with that, so we're on our own, is what you're saying.
For
Who's gonna come after us for ethical violations
How are we
then?
gonna get out of jail if you're not gonna?
You have to go to your own personal attorney.
You have to post bond.
I mean, who's gonna complain?
Well, you, listen, complain,
You know,
you should
can be-
just look at
that's-
yourself.
You can be in legal jeopardy, technically.
So if
voting
I vote,
on-
if I vote for a grant,
Voting on something you're not supposed to vote on can, in theory, lead to criminal liability. I believe it's a misdemeanor offense.
so are you the one that's gonna file it? I mean, who's gonna
no,
file it?
No, but
Well,
the.
you-
I mean the
the-
Attorney General, I
The
don't mean you
DA might
personally.
want to talk to you, right? So the
The
district
district
attorney might
attorney.
want to
Okay,
talk
I'm
to you
just
about some
curious.
jail time, that sort of thing.
Okay, thank you.
Let me ask,
Sure, go ahead.
before we leave it, aside from money-involved matters,
Mm.
where would we go in cases of questions about, I don't want to use the word nepotism, but that's what it is. It's not necessarily that negative of a
So
connotation.
I think family conflicts fall into the same.
Family connections in
Yeah.
certain positions, whether, I know it's not in there already, but, just always been curious about that, even though it's a non-paid position that we sit.
I don't get it.
I would like to
We do
know.
have affiliations with other bodies, other governance bodies and other policymakers.
I would love to have an offline conversation where we get more detail and then I can give you a more specific direction on who to talk to, whether that's us or someone
Well,
else.
I think it's not a problem, it's
Right.
just questions. I just find it interesting.
So when are you gonna start teaching?
Happy to.
All right, shall we move on to the charter school procedures?
Yes, please.
All right, so for the charter schools procedures, they have not been updated in 11 years. So I actually, when I redrafted these, Julie asked me to handle that. I deleted the whole thing and started over from scratch, and I kept most of the important stuff. I didn't try to change anything really important, but I did rewrite the whole thing. I deleted everything that just quotes from statute because I don't understand why it should be there in the first place. And then I tried to create one policy that governs every type of charter school and authorizer dispute that can come to you. There are 5 statutes where districts and charters can bring an argument to you and have you rule on it. You used to have 2 of those statutes covered by one policy, 2 statutes covered by another policy, and the 5th statute, you didn't have any policy that applied to it. So I put all 5 statutes in this one policy and tried to come up with one system to govern all of them. Hopefully I succeeded. I talked to a couple of 2 attorneys from the charter bar who did get back to me, and then CASB got back to me with comments on this as well. I'll walk you through sort of the bigger picture things. Well, actually, that was the bigger picture things. For the smaller stuff, I tried to simplify it and make it easier to use for the lawyers. You have one big discussion item that I would like your guidance on and what you want to see in the final product for the format of the hearing itself. So after we get through all the briefing and arguing with the attorneys on motions practice, they come and they sit in front of you and you have the hearing itself. Currently what you do is 30 minutes each side. You get to interrupt them and pepper them with questions. And then after an hour of doing that, you then deliberate for however long you need to, about 30 minutes, and you render a decision. It has been suggested that maybe we could do that differently. One idea would be to follow more of a legislative hearing model where you have each side gets 10 or 15 minutes and they get to do it uninterrupted. So they just talk and you don't interrupt. And then each one of you get a set amount of time to ask questions. So it would be Board Member Rankin for 5 minutes, Board Member Flores for 5 minutes, Chairwoman Schroeder for 5 minutes, et cetera, et cetera. And you can cooperate with each other and cede time to each other if you want to, but you don't have to. You can take your whole 5 minutes yourself to ask whatever questions you want to ask of the parties. There's that model. There's the model you're using, and then there's a range in between of options. But it was suggested that we should ask you what you think.
Board Member McClellan, go ahead.
I have been concerned that our current procedure allows any one of us, to filibuster unevenly one side or the other and basically eat up their presentation time. So I would be supportive of lifting that out of our procedures so that each side can at least be heard for whatever time this board agrees is an appropriate period.
10 minutes, I think.
Well, that's a separate question, but my point is,
So you like the more like congressional hearing model that I was describing?
well, allowing them to speak uninterrupted, and I don't know that I have the answer for exactly how long that should be, but allowing them to have at least some even uninterrupted time to speak, it seems only fair, because sometimes we've had folks come to present to us, and I feel for them, they have no idea how long they're gonna get to speak, because as soon as we start peppering them, we could eat up their whole presentation time, and then they really don't get to present to us.
And that's generally how it works in appellate litigation. That's what that's modeled after.
That's what it's modeled after, yeah.
Yeah, it's what would happen in the Colorado Supreme Court. You get 30 minutes, and you're gonna get 2 minutes into your presentation before the justices start interrupting you.
Because they've
However-
read the briefs.
Yep.
These guys don't come and tell us anything new.
Right.
So,
but-
for that reason, there has to be the assumption that we have read the briefs
Mhm.
and know that, and the opportunity to ask a question. I'm not opposed to the 5 minutes each, but that's the important part.
But just because that's the appellate norm doesn't mean it has to be the norm here, right?
I didn't know that. I assumed that it had to be. 'Cause
Uh,
it's been that way since I got on the
You can
board.
structure this however you want to, as long as it's a public hearing. So,
But I
Okay.
think,
I think the rub,
Rebecca's
though, is
correct.
if you
We
Just a
don't
minute,
give
just a
them
minute.
time
allow them to
sometimes.
go,
I agree with you.
if you allow them to go uninterrupted, they may very well get outside what is really permissible for them to talk about and bring up items that are not germane.
mhm.
And I guess the only defense at that point would be to object.
It's gotta be in the record. Is that what you're talking about? They go outside the
Yeah,
record?
I mean, they go outside the record, and we see that all the time.
I mean, we could write it in such a way that they get theoretically uninterrupted time, but the board chair can bang the gavel and tell them to stay, within the lanes.
But when have they done that? I mean, usually they go straight to the point. And we are the ones that
They
are.
go to the point
that-
they want to go to.
Yeah.
We really don't,
They go to
so-
the point they want to go to. They don't go to the point that is within the confines of the record.
No, but I agree with Rebecca. I mean, I think that in a sense, sometimes we don't let them talk. And we'd like to hear them. And we just don't do it. But if they have a set time, then I think that would be fairer.
Our point, Val, is that they just repeat what they've already written, which is what, no matter how much time we give them. I mean, we shouldn't give them very much time simply because we don't need the repetition.
Well,
If we haven't done our homework, that's our own
Well, the thing is,
problem.
if we gave them 10, 15 minutes, I mean, and we've read our stuff, and
So 7 times 5 is
Yeah, I
35
picked that 'cause
minutes.
it was close to 30.
Is there anything binding on us to limit each side to 30 minutes?
You could give them a whole day if you want to.
Oh, let's
no,
do
no,
that.
no, no.
Then we'll be totally done.
Jane, I'm gonna have words with
I'm
you
with
after
Jane
this.
now.
Cover 2 appeals and the whole.
Right.
I don't like it.
Well, but you're saying that if we memorize this, I don't literally, but if we read this and we remember this about it, that, or do we have any say as to changing it, other than what you just gave us just now, the option?
Yeah, this whole thing is for you to tell me what you want in it.
Okay, okay.
So
But-
what's your time frame on this?
We were thinking we'd talk about it today and then would vote on it whenever you were ready to do so. It would be nice if
We
we're,
would put it in final form, right?
yeah. Well,
You have it, or you have it.
I mean, we could adopt it exactly the way it is if I just take the draft watermark off of the document. I
For
wouldn't
some reason,
recommend
I
that.
haven't seen it. Is it in here somewhere?
Yep.
Yeah, it's in there.
Good. See, That's
Would
one-
it-
another thing I didn't read.
So the draft is in there, and then there's a version of the old one and the new one with
And a
comment
proposed.
bubbles that explain the
I think we ought
changes.
to lay it over till
Yep.
January 2023.
Oh,
That works.
come on, Steve.
I would
second
suggest
that.
if we're planning to update them
number
this
is it?
year, we should probably get it done before the next round of appeals comes in, which should be, there's
Just
a
one.
notice that was filed today,
Yeah.
but generally, you know,
No, that's not-
this fall.
This week?
Like
So
for
Joe, I
instance-
think you hear, I'm pretty sure
Yeah.
that the majority of the
There's a
board
lot of
members
people.
are not comfortable with the
What's
interruptions.
the number?
Am I right?
Yeah, I don't,
I mean, I'm used to it because I've
Yeah, I'm
sat
not-
through a number of appeals, but I don't think that others, so if
Just
they
'cause
can
we-
get their points, I mean, when we ask people to speak to us, we say 3 minutes.
Mhm.
And then, when you're forced to have only 3 minutes, you get to the point.
Mhm.
I think 10 minutes each is probably plenty.
I
Given
don't
that
know.
we've already read the briefs, we've read your.
10 minutes, I don't know, maybe 15 minutes.
Let's leave it 10 and then give us more time to ask questions. Because when we ask a question, they answer and they are very slow and they can take up a lot of time
They can
answering.
filibuster too.
Yep,
So
that's exactly
six
what they will
by-
do.
That's what
6
they
by
do.
7 is 42 minutes, so, 10 minutes, and then 6 minutes per member for questioning gets you to an hour and 2 minutes.
I think that's
good.
pretty good.
Yeah.
And then we discuss among ourselves.
All right, I'll put
There's
that in
also-
the
What do you
next
think
draft.
about
Well,
that, Joe?
isn't there also an additional amount of time, in this case, 10 minutes, I'm guessing, for the rebuttal part of it? But is that only at the response end of it?
That has to come out of their allotted time.
Yeah, so
That's the way it's
see-
always been.
So we're up to basically, you said 102 minutes?
An hour and 62 total.
60.
Oh, six,
62.
62.
You're thinking of
There's
100.
never anything new in the rebuttal. There's never anything new.
Well,
So you start with 10, and they'd be able to reserve,
That's
normal
just
would
to
be
be
2
more.
minutes,
just
right?
to
So
be
they'd go for
closer
8.
to our time of.
Yeah, they'd go
voting.
for 8, the other side
Yeah.
would go for 10, and then the school would get 2 more for rebuttal, probably is how they'd do
Well, we
it.
generally finish those in 2 hours, is that right?
Mm-hmm. I think we allocate 2 hours, don't we? Hour and a half or 2 hours?
It's normally an hour and a half. You
Hour
do an
and a
hour
half
for the hearing and then
total.
30 minutes
You
to
know what we
deliberate.
Yeah.
would get?
Yeah.
I can just see them handing us something like this. Like, for instance, that company that came today, boy, that was boilerplate, and that was over and over and over and over, they said some things. So, I don't know, I mean, they could come at us that way too.
We already get, if we look at the.
Well, they could get to,
record.
they could get to more. That's what I'm saying.
we're
You mean the briefs will be longer?
turning everybody off.
The briefs could be longer. They're getting longer and longer.
Well, but good good brief writers know better than to do that, actually.
I did shorten the page limits on the reply brief in this draft.
Oh, good.
You don't,
Shorten
A
you don't have to
good-
let me
a-
do that.
Shorten what?
The page limit on the reply brief.
Good idea.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, they'll just go on.
That's good.
It's human nature to just go
So-
on and on and on.
So,
I
Mr.
think you're billing
Peters,
better word.
say we have our template 30 minutes here. So what
Or
what
page.
will the chair
Yeah.
say to these people, each side, as they respectively do their thing? You have 10 minutes to present your case. There will be 10 minutes for what?
10 minutes for rebuttal.
What's the middle part? Because
It's-
then there's the 10 minutes for board.
So the,
Board questions
Questions.
to either side. In other words,
Okay.
we don't get to speak with those who come before us right now, except during their presentation.
Okay,
which
I
some
want to
of
know
us
what's
like.
in the middle section of
So-
that 30 minutes.
my understanding of what we're talking about would be that it would be 10 minutes for the school, of which they might reserve 2 minutes for rebuttal or some amount that in their choosing. But it would be basically 10 minutes for the school, followed by 10 minutes for the district or CSI. And then that's it. Then you go to the questions. So you'd get 6 minutes. Your colleagues would each get 6 minutes. And there's 7 of you. That's 42.
So
right?
there's
So you-
really no 10 minutes for the question part. It's just per,
I don't follow.
per each of us, there's some minutes.
Yes.
Well, you could yield your time.
You can yield your
Yes.
time.
That's your proposal.
But you can each get 10 minutes if that's
I
what you're
know.
asking.
You guys,
No.
you're not seeing my mental pictures here.
Yeah, I'm not.
I've got a
I'm not
30-minute
following.
timeline,
You
I've
can
got it
get-
divided into 3
See if
parts.
you can get
But we don't have a
most of
30-minute
us to-
timeline. We're talking
Well,
about changing
right.
away from that.
If we get away from that, that's
Yeah,
totally
20 minutes for the presentation only,
And
followed by
then
42 for
per
questioning.
board member minutes,
Yeah,
whatever.
42 for questions and answers.
Which can be yielded to another.
Yeah.
Either way. Okay, I'm fine with that. That's
So and this was just for information today, so to bring your attention to this, and you know, you can go back and read it more carefully if you have questions. Let us know, and we'll make sure that Joe gets that, and then we'll bring it back to you in June.
Yep. There's one more question I wanted to ask, just because I told Casby I would. They pointed out, the new general counsel there pointed out that under the statute, you're not required to have a hearing on the first appeal of a approval or disapproval of a resolution, of the charter application. So the-
I'm sorry?
For the charter application, or really a renewal or revocation, right? You know, that's a two-step process, a first appeal followed by a second appeal.
Uh-huh.
You hold a hearing on both ends, or both appeals. It turns out you're not required to on the first one, and Casby pointed that out
So
to
we
me.
can just vote on it based on what they
Based on the
send to us,
briefs, yeah.
without having them appear?
Yep.
Can we go back and
That's-
forth?
I
No.
suppose, you could set it up so that you,
I don't like that at all.
Oh, I
Yeah.
like
Because
it.
only one of the parties has the right to appeal.
you know, so Julie and I talked about this and suspected that you might not like it. But it is a point that is within your power to decide.
But I like it.
So you could set it up so that there's a default, right? So you presume that you'll have a hearing, but you can do away with it on motion of the parties, or opposite, you assume you're not going to, but you allow the parties to ask for one.
For example, this last one where we didn't have, what was the word?
Well,
The
that
Adams
wasn't a
12?
hearing. That was just
Sure,
that was
just
just a
an
motion.
approval, a motion to.
Motion.
The motion to dismiss and Stargate versus Adams 12.
Mhm.
so,
Yeah.
yeah,
It was just a motion to dismiss.
yeah,
Okay.
something like that.
Just a mechanical question about that. In the event that there were not a hearing, how would the dissenting voter's opinion be recorded? Would we still have a written opinion so that if you
Yeah.
really disagreed with the majority on the board, at least people would know that?
Yeah, you can only act as a board in public session, right? So you would do that portion of it, the 30 minutes where you discuss and vote, exactly the same way. It just wouldn't be preceded by an hour of talking to the parties about it. Right.
Board Member Rankin? Do you have an opinion? You don't care one way or the other?
Well, once he said that we have half an hour to, once he said we have a half an hour to discuss it, I was thinking, if we had all the paperwork and we came in and just voted, I think that would be very unfair to, but the fact that we can discuss it, at least it shows we read it and we had an opinion at that point. So I'm fine with that if the other people don't have to come for an hour.
Yeah, I
That's
don't know
fine.
that I saw a lot of support for the not having a hearing at all.
Mhm.
Did I?
No,
Well,
that's not, that's gonna make
Board Member
that's
Goff?
gonna make us subject
I'm
to
kind
a
of
lot of criticism.
flipping here.
Yeah.
So the
People wanna be heard.
only party
Okay.
would we even have the presence of either party here? I mean, we have to have a public
Yeah, that's Steve's point.
decision-making
The-
hearing session. We have to do that, but
Yeah,
I think it needs to be clear whether there's somebody here with us or not, either side, and in this case, it would be the school, the appellee, right? Most
I
likely.
guess they'd have to answer any questions.
I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, I think, thank you, Casby, but we probably aren't ready for that
Yeah, tell them nice
stage yet.
try.
I didn't, yeah.
I know exactly
thought
where
I
they're
would.
going.
Get too
I guess
upset
I
or
don't.
something? What's that little
Uh,
Casby baby?
I told him I'd ask.
Thank you.
Who's their new legal counsel?
Jennifer Mueller. Forgive me, I'm forgetting her
Okay.
first name. But she's out of Illinois. She's a special education attorney, and thus far I've been thrilled to work with her.
Okay.
And so she's gonna be our new person?
No, no.
No, Casby's new attorney.
Oh, Casby's. So.
Anything else,
so
Mr.
if-
Peters?
Would it be possible, I mean, this seems like a, I don't know. I'm sorry. Do you think we could have this till August? Like to look over, really fine, look over, have our friends look it over, our lawyer friends look it over, and,
I'm in no hurry. This is your
I mean,
your
this would
decision. to
give
make.
Are you
us-
saying that we're gonna have charter appeals in August?
You have one notice of appeal that was filed today. That's going to be governed by the old procedures no matter what.
Which is August.
Yeah. Yeah, it should come up in August.
so by August, we can give you our, our opinions, and we can really think about this and
How about we do it in
some
June?
digging, do some
I'm
research.
for August.
Really? You'd want it solar?
So, I'm sorry,
So
the
you don't
appeal
want-
that was just filed?
No, no, we're
can't-
talking, Val is trying to put off this decision.
No, I'm for
Not
that,
putting
too.
it off, I'm
Okay.
just
Yeah, I
trying
can,
to
I
say
can
that.
fill you in offline if you'd like. There's an appeal filed today.
But we won't be forced to hear it till August.
My guess is that they'll agree to waive the deadlines.
Bill, what?
They'll probably agree to waive the 60-day deadline. Obviously, I haven't actually spoken with either of the attorneys yet, so I don't know
thought we sent
that.
out a note saying don't do this.
We did send out a note
You did.
saying that you guys were not gonna have a board meeting in July, and to please plan accordingly.
Yeah, we're not-
But it was a please, plan accordingly.
Well, You
Yeah.
can't take the rights away from them.
That's why I
Yeah,
said
right.
please.
Yeah.
I
So-
was just offering
Right.
that the state board did not
Please
wanna
let
have a
us
meeting,
take
so
the
if
rights.
that works, and we can ask them,
So
but
my,
we can't force them.
yes, and my point on this is, I'd like to really look it over, I mean.
Yeah, please
and-
do.
And then in August, we come to you and we say, well, this I like, this I don't like, and then we really have time to,
So it's not on the agenda in June. Is that the understanding, colleagues?
yes.
How does a
Yes,
charter
sir.
school have an appeal hearing in August? What does that mean for
Okay,
planned
so,
openings?
so is that okay if we come back in August?
Yeah, I'm at your disposal,
Yeah.
Board Member Flores.
It sounds like that's fine with everybody.
Oh, thank you very much.
Okay. No, we're gonna stay here for a couple more hours, 'cause
I'm begging you.
You saw the movie. Similar sound.
Thank you, oh.